The left just doesn't get it. He was literally this generation's Martin Luther King Jr.
Yikes.
That's what my neighbor said.
That makes sense.
Why? He literally was. You just hate to admit it. He had the courage to say things even if it meant getting canceled or attacked or literally murdered, just like MLK. Well, I don't need to disparage the dead, especially in a public video, right? But I do want to tell you a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. Whatever, if this will make you feel better. Then at the end, I think you can tell me why Charlie Kirk is the modern day version of him. Let's start with education. Dr. King started college when he was 15 years old. He got his Bachelor of Arts at Morehouse, then his Bachelor of Divinity, and then his PhD in sociology from Boston University. All by the time he was 25. He was arrested and jailed nearly 30 times for civil disobedience and also completely bullshit made-up charges. He spent over 100 days total in jail, including 8 days in Birmingham jail, which is where he wrote his famous letter from Birmingham jail. He was the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner of his era at 35 years old. Then he took the winnings and donated it all, $500,000 today, to the civil rights movement. He personally met with U.S. presidents. Yeah, so did not to campaign for them, to advocate for change, and world leaders, including the Pope. He led the Montgomery bus boycott for 381 days, during which time his house was firebombed with his wife and baby daughter inside. Pretty crazy. And when an angry group gathered outside of his house, he convinced them not to retaliate. He drew 250,000 people to the March on Washington, which is where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech, pushing the Voting Rights Act of 1964 forward. By 1965, he was receiving an average of 40 death threats every day. His family said they lived with the phone ringing at all hours of the night. His activism is tied to two of the most transformative laws in U.S. history. His nonviolent approach influenced activists worldwide. He opposed the Vietnam War way before it was popular to do so, knowing it would lose him a lot of political influence. And of course, like Charlie, he was then assassinated. So, do you understand why it might be offensive to people when you compare his legacy to that of a 31-year-old man who traveled the country debating college kids?
Yo, so we back in here for another edition of F-ya-Motha, and I shouldn't even have to go into great lengths and detail about why Charlie Kirk is not the equivalent of Martin Luther King. Now, me personally, I'm not gonna say I don't like Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm more of a Malcolm X fan. I didn't really agree with his tactics. I'm not with the nonviolence. I'm with the shits. So yeah, like I wouldn't been like John Lewis getting beat over the head, or like Dr. Martin Luther King getting pistol whipped, rocks thrown at his face, all types of stuff. Nah, and I don't believe in like religion. So all that pacifist rhetoric from the book of John, which Jesus talked about passivity. Fuck that. We got to get it all. I keep telling people if I was born back in slavery or even Jim Crow, shit would have never got off the ground, would have never took off. Slavery would have never took off because the ratio of black slaves to white people was 1 to 3, which they enslaved indigenous people too, not red natives, but black indigenous people. So it probably was higher. Shit would have never took off. And if it did, Jim Crow would have never lasted as long as it did. I think Jim Crow lasted from 1890 to 1963. Or 1960, fuck it. If you want to be technical, Jim Crow lasted all the way up until right now, god damn it. But yeah, I've never been a fan of Martin Luther King. However, Charlie Kirk was a fucking scumbag. If you don't know the things that he said, it will behoove you to go on YouTube and just watch videos. Anybody that says that 13% of people commit 51% of the country's crime is uneducated, hasn't done the research, or is intellectually dishonest, which he was all three. 2, Martin Luther King rallied for civil rights because black people were being taxed and their taxes wasn't being used to protect them and or grant them any other liberties in the country that they were working and paying taxes to. Schools were run down, books was reused. It wasn't necessarily to eat with white people. It was the fact of it. I pay taxes. I'm a citizen. I should be able to roam throughout this country, go in your white ass restaurant or establishment and be treated humanely. However, people like Charlie Kirk didn't think the civil rights was necessary, and it didn't do any good. Those are his words, not mine. He even told a 13-year-old kid that in an airport. I seen the video. Once again, if you haven't seen this, it behoove you to go on YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram, or TikTok. The video is plastered everywhere. The fact that he actually was that moronic and thought that if a black pilot is flying the plane, which he said, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to think, I hope he's qualified. Why the fuck would he not be? Once again, these are his words, not mine. But why the fuck would he not be? He has to get a license. He has to log a certain amount of hours. That's some shit you can't bypass, no matter gender, ethnicity, or race. You're not getting past that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have to fly 50,000 hours of flying. Like, that's not some simple feat. You don't get that in a Cracker Jack box, and they ain't giving you that shit just because you black. So he was an idiot. Not to mention, black pilots actually have a historical record of crashing less than white pilots. So then there's that. The fact that he just thought Martin Luther King was a despicable person, those are his words, not mine, shows he was intellectually lazy and just boldly and blatantly stupid. Suffered from DWS. If you don't know what that is, the link will be in my description. You'll be able to cop a shirt. Maybe you'll be enlightened. But yeah, anybody that's following the rhetoric of Charlie Kirk is a moron. The people that passed this bullshit law, Florida County has approved naming a road after Charlie Kirk. They're idiots. If this is true, and I don't know how valid this is, but it says legislation is being filed in the U.S. House to place Charlie Kirk on 400,000 silver dollar coins in 2026. These people are idiots. He was a podcaster. Nothing more, nothing less. So the fact that you have people equating him to Martin Luther King went to jail, got beat, has infamous and even famous speeches. I delivered my people into a burning house is an infamous speech, but it's poetic. Charlie Kirk has neither under his belt. The only thing he's famous for is going to colleges, and I think I stated this before, going to colleges and debating people that are youthful, impressionable, and really not that knowledgeable. What the fuck are you doing being 30 years old debating motherfuckers that are 19 and 20 years old? How much could they possibly know? They've only been around since I was 22, which ain't saying shit. The information they got, even though they got Google at their fingertips, probably goes back as 9/11. You asking them shit about racial discrimination laws and transgender equality within this country and the history thereof. He was dead wrong. That's like me going up to a 6-year-old and quizzing a 6-year-old about any part of Civil War. Of course they're not going to know. They don't have a frame of reference. They're not knowledgeable. And let's not get it fucked up. He going to a college, but we can get it just clear the air. It wasn't like a lot of them people was goddamn A students in high school. Now, I'm not saying that they were DEI college students. What I am saying is you don't retain most of that shit, even if you wasn't a magnet program. You could tell by some of them people he was engaging with, they wasn't that knowledgeable. They forgot that shit as soon as they graduated high school. So he needed his ass kicked just for that. However, we don't promote violence. I'm just using that as a exaggerated expression. But realistically, he was a scumbag. And anybody that hasn't actually studied him, wouldn't listen to several of his videos that are on YouTube, went to turningpoint.com and actually seen the rhetoric. Not to mention, they've actually been sued for racial discrimination within the company. That's not me saying this. Once again, I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. In any event, if you like this video, subscribe, leave a comment. If you one of these Charlie Kirk jackoffs that are now riding the bandwagon because he was Christian and didn't really follow this nigga before him, F-ya-Motha. If you have been following Charlie Kirk, then you know every single solitary word that I'm saying is true, and most of the stuff that I said was his words, not mine. There's no debating this. You can't debate this. Argue with your mother. In any event, I'm out.